Okay, Dane Rose here, joining you for week 34 in this 52-week project in which I'm packing as much information that I think might lead to well-being as I've absorbed in several decades of deep research and experimentation. And in this video, first of all, it's a very wide lens, and so in this video we're looking at a very big scale, which is one of the reasons it's week 34. Go back to week number 1 if you have any questions about whether this is a good fit, the 80-20 principle. Ego and reality and ecology. And the purpose of this is, it's actually bringing you up to date with what I'm working with today and in the last few hours. So this is exciting news for me personally. And it's a paradigm of understanding the relationship of the ego, the individual, with the larger framework of the species, of the human species in the context of the larger ecology, of this moment in time in relationship to all the other moments of time. And in that context, what are some of the principles that we can use to navigate in our relationship with the world, etc.? So the first thing that I want to do is lay out a couple of kind of drawings and analogies that I find useful. So this little dot is us in this moment in time. It's this little dot right here. And this larger dot is us as a conscious self. So this represents, me, Dane Rose, making a video in the context of a 52-week blog, in the context of a YouTube channel, in the context of an intention. It's part of my intention this year to create 100,000 moments of love. Simply meaning that as a result of something I've done, either 100,000 people feel loved at least once, or a few people feel loved 100,000 times. So there's that. And then this is part of a paradigm that has been making a lot of sense to me recently, that rather than reducing all reality to rationalist, materialist, scientific capitalism, that it is simpler and more sustainable to have a paradigm of scientific well-being. Simply that we measure scientifically, we measure all of the metrics by which you and I experience physical, emotional, financial, spiritual, mental well-being. And anything that helps those metrics go up is measured in terms of units of energy to invested, required to generate that amount of well-being. And that we have a framework that what generates well-being, particularly sustainable well-being, because there's some things like cocaine that might give you a good shot of euphoria for a couple of hours, followed by withdrawal symptoms. So that's obviously more equivalent to taking out a big loan on a credit card, having the euphoria, and then having the slog of having to pay it back. It's not sustainable. There's no net gain compared to something else where we go jogging or something like that, and the next day we have more muscle, next day we have even more muscle, we eat some vitamins, it's a little better today, a little better today. That kind of thing, which is sustainable well-being. And so in a paradigm of sustainable scientific well-being. You measure well-being in all of its felt metrics scientifically. And then you guide your actions by what I guess, the hypothesis, the scientific hypothesis, the hypothesis that creating a blog of well-being will increase people's well-being more than not creating said blog of well-being. That being the case, how to go about it. And it's a hypothesis, so in scientific well-being, it has to be measured scientifically. And you are the measurement, meaning if you feel your well-being goes up financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, then express that, and that will be, considered a measurement. And up by how much? Money up 2% or money down 5%. I went and bought something based on this exercise, and then I got depressed. Well, that's part of science. You have to test your hypothesis and see what works, but you have to proceed based on your best guess of what will work within a current paradigm, and then you've got to challenge yourself to transcend your current hypothesis. I just heard that a leading heart surgeon has changed the view that it's not fats that are hurting one's heart, it's sugar. So, new dictates, new hypothesis. They got it wrong for 50 years. So this is part of science, to try something and measure it and learn what's good and what isn't good. So this is Dane doing all that. And then this is every single thing I can remember. Tormenting my younger brother when I was 8-year-old with sock wars, eating things, lighting. There used to be these aerosol spray cans in my father's construction company, and we discovered that if you lit a match to one of them and started an aerosol, you'd have a flame torch. So of course, these are the exciting remnants of memory, and so all of me is everything that I've ever been conscious of. And this is the boundary of the ego. And we have the sense of time because what's happening right now, when I'm lost in the moment right now, I forget about burning aerosol cans. I forget about fireworks. I forget about building tree forts. I forget about eating. I forget about this. And I'm just lost here in the moment, in the flow. My lens is focused completely on the moment, and yet there is stuff of me that exists out there that I lose. And then I remember, put the past back together again and say, oh, first this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and I built something. And that's the larger sense of self. And of course, there's the experience of time, because I have the anticipation of something that hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure the sun will rise tomorrow. And then I remember, yes, it's rising. So I have the sense of the future. That's where I'm going to be tomorrow on this little dot. Then I have the sense of the past. This is where I was. So I have this experience of time, and it's generated by the focus of the conscious lens. Meaning, if we'll just zoom into right here, you see that you're seeing less and less, but you're getting more and more detailed focus. Like I should say, really, if my camera was a little bit more effective at focusing, you'd be getting a fingerprint read and would be able to say, yes, this is indeed the man in question. So the more we zoom in to the moment, the more detail we get about a smaller area. And the more we zoom out, the more time we encompass. And, if we zoom out into the sense, we have this concept of seeing the entire universe unfold in a mental concept called a 14 billion year Big Bang. And so this is, laying that out before us with great perspective. And then zooming into this moment, I'm completely lost doing what I'm doing. So this is me. And the question is, what's the relationship with this little dot and this little dot? Well, one of the little drawings I like to make is this little thing here, where I want you to imagine every one of these is an age. So let's say 1-year-old relates to 2-year-old like this. It relates to 3-year-old like this. It relates to 4-year-old like this. Relates to 5-year-old. Relates to 6-year-old. Then 1-year-old relates to 7-year-old like this. 8-year-old like this. 9-year-old like this. 10-year-old. Now then my 10-year-old relates to my 1-year-old like this, to my this-year-old like this, etc., etc. And in a perfectly strong thing, what we're actually building is a fabric of identity, a fabric of self, which very much like any architectural structure, the strongest the strongest geometric shape on Earth is a sphere that is linked at every point in the sphere to every other point in the sphere with perfect balance, in a way that holds the sphere in shape, meaning a material that pulls it in and resists collapse, both. So if it was just dental floss, even if it only pulled, like if we had dental floss connecting more than 1 million points within a little sphere like this, crossways, we would get into problems in the middle, which is one of the interesting aspects of the torus shape in space-time. But if we, and all of this is as new to me as it is to you. So this is the truest sense of science in terms of the wild hunts off in imagination, and then seeing how it works, following the thought line through, measuring it. But, let's say we had 1 million points of dental floss, and this point connected to every other point and vice versa, etc. See, when you tried to squish the ball, all the connections of dental floss from here to here would stop it from squishing. It would be this incredibly, profoundly strong substance. And so, in architecture and houses, I build decks sometimes. And so you have, this, deck design, and these are, 4 by 4 posts. And, that's good. But if you want to make them really strong, you do diagonals. And then you do it the other way, and the other way, and the other way. And this dramatically increases the strength, and stops the deck from toppling over in an earthquake or blowing off in a windstorm. And so going back to this same concept within ages, and I'm going to link it to marriage if I remember. In fact, let me write marriage so that I do remember. A little bit of aggravation from the marker, a little bit of grief. So in the concept of ages, we've got these 10 ages. So the question is, what is the healthiest, strongest relationship between all these ages? And as I would say, it would be a harmonious, sustainable, win-win relationship between each of the 10 ages and each of the other 10 ages. And we could call that, I drew it out in these dots, but really we could probably better draw it as a circle. Let's make it really simple. So let's do a 5-pointed star inside a circle. Now, if we did have a strong bond connection to the circle, this holds the circle in place. And if we add in additional elements, because this is, a two-dimensional thing, we start adding it this way and this way and this way all the way around, it becomes an incredibly strong sphere. And these are somewhat indirect relationships. Now, if we add in these relationships, so you have the sphere, all points connecting on the sphere, and then this point connecting to this point, and this point, and this point, and this point, and vice versa. This is an incredibly strong shape. It becomes twice as strong, of course, if we do another 5-pointed star here. That gives us 10 points. Now, and you see a circle starts to slowly form in the middle. Now, what I'm trying to illustrate is the strength, the internal strength that comes when the 1-year-old is in alignment with the 2-year-old and the 3-year-old, up to 10. It's really our entire life, and then the 10-year-old is in alignment with the 9-year-old, the 8-year-old, etc. When the 1-year-old loves the 10-year-old and the 10-year-old loves the 1-year-old, it is a mutual relationship, kind of the difference between you've had those experiences of feeling deeply in lust or in love with another person. Oh, it's just so beautiful. I want to be close. I want to touch. And the other person is like, get away from me, get away from me. This is in the larger fabric of humanity, which I'm trying to illustrate in this kind of globe. There's obviously not a marriage there. Marriage, the equal respect and honoring, the win-win, sustainable relating and partnership between one individual and another. It is conceivable, meaning there are beings, there are consciousnesses in the multiverse in which all consciousnesses have an attuned sense. And, at the risk of, losing some of you in this cultural upbringing, one of my consciousnesses is a dimension in which there's 12 of us that are completely psychic intuitive. Now when I say one of my consciousness, meaning from time to time, my primary identity, meaning my sense of self when I'm meditating, having a certain fantasy, tuned into a certain frequency, goes to this place. I have no idea where it is. It doesn't seem to be what I would call physical. But it's like these 12 lights, and they're kind of in this, it's blue, so I'll do it in blue. So, and there's these kind of facet-like structures, and it actually is reminding me of one of my kind of crystals. And there are points on this whole structure. And in that space, there is a sense that each of these nodes have individuality, but it functions through complete empathy, through complete attunement, as if it were one. Because as soon as any consciousness in that node structure has a thought, has a feeling, has an awareness, it becomes present to everyone else in the ecology. It's an ecology of around 12. I call it 12 because that's my sensing of it. And there is really no difference, meaning because we all feel it empathically, because we all see it, sense it, etc., even though there's no physical, there's no legs and hands, it's like little orb auras. So around each one of these little nodes is kind of like a little yellow sphere, a little white, etc. So there's kind of this presence, and this kind of hum, this nice cocoon of this is me. But at the same time, every other presence in the constellation has the same awareness. So there's no separation. And there's the sense of belonging, and there's the sense of joy, and there's the sense of love. Loneliness cannot exist in this constellation because as soon as someone thinks, feels, sees something, as soon as one of these orbs has an awareness, it is shared. There is no misunderstanding in this constellation because there is no language. Meaning, when we're talking in colors and emotions and geometric shapes, how can you have misunderstanding? You know, you may argue about what to call this, but if I say, is this a curved surface, you're going to say yes, or it's lots of little dots, depending on if you want to be argumentative. You don't argue about that. What you argue is what words to call it. You argue about what the meanings of those words are. You argue about paradigms, etc. And so this just bypasses all of that. And so no misunderstanding, no time. Because there's no sense of, should I share this with them? Ooh, when's a good time? Blah, blah, blah. It's an organic changing. So it's kind of like the cooperation of a lotus flower opening. It all opens together. And there is a sense of rhythm, but I don't get the sense that this me here in this constellation has a sense of this is what I was yesterday, this is what. I think it's very much a now focus, which means complete and utter integrity, complete and utter integration between each element of the nodes and between each node within itself, because there is a response and an awareness. It's kind of like, imagine a flower opening in response to the sun. Well, as the sun gets brighter and changes, the flower opens more. As light passes through this crystalline shape, it is refracted in different ways within the crystalline shape. As that is felt by one, it is felt by all instantaneously. It is a shared celebration. And this is a very idyllic form of reality, a very idyllic form of existence. It's one of the reasons I'm not afraid to die. And I'm very afraid to live. Because, by contrast, every moment in life is, often the opposite of such an attuned marriage, even within the self. The 1-year-old is trying to believe what dad told him to believe so that dad doesn't kill him. I'm trying to teach the 1-year-old what I believe because I'm going to lose my sanity if I call what dad did unconditional love, which is what dad calls it. And so there's not a marriage between my 1-year-old and my 43-year-old. It's a tenuous relationship. I'm afraid of being swept away into the unconditional trust and acceptance of the 1-year-old in the face of, an adult with sociopathic tendencies and PTSD. And as a 43-year-old, my 1-year-old is afraid of being swept into the awareness of how horrific the environment is for that 1-year-old when it can't do anything about it. And so we get into things like time travel through meditation, bringing in a loving reality for that 1-year-old, deep inner child work. So what I'm aiming for is a circle in which my 43-year-old loves my 1-year-old and trusts my 1-year-old, and my 1-year-old trusts my 43-year-old and loves my 43-year-old, and my 43-year-old respects and honors what my 42-year-old did and has compassion for how and why they did that, and my 42-year-old respects where I've gone with the material developed at 42, and that there is a marriage within the self. And I would say that if there is a marriage within the self, it becomes very difficult. It becomes very easy to marry someone else who is married to themselves. I call it an inner marriage, when all the different inner ages are attuned to one another. I enjoy some of the songs of one of the great pop stars recently, and she was talking, longingly about, like, how can I find that inner child again? Katy Perry has had both an innocence of, speaking to, fireworks roar, speaking to that little girl, wide awake, speaking to that little girl and championing her, and that little girl coming into the future to rescue her from the insanity induced by the acculturated mind wanting to believe the lies fed to the culture in the form of Prince Charming or whatever. And in this integration, the reason it's so hard to be married to someone when we're not integrated is if the 4-year-old is absolutely certain in order to survive it has to go left, and the 10-year-old is absolutely certain that to culturally survive and look cool it's got to go right, you've got a self-intention. Now when you enter that picture in relationship, you are either going to be, if you go right, you're going to help the 10-year-old. The 10-year-old will be all into you, and the 4-year-old will be trying to sabotage the relationship right and left. Or you're going to go for the 4-year-old, and then your 10-year-old is going to hate you. You make me look ugly. Get out of here. I hate you. And the 4-year-old will be so devastated when the relationship ends because the 10-year-old sabotages it. And so, if someone is split on the inner ages, then it becomes very difficult to see where to go. There's no way to win, in a sense, because when you're equally divided in some internal battle, no matter which way you go, you've alienated half of your partner. and now you're the enemy because you were the tie casting vote, and the half that you've dishonored by entering an unresolved battle is the half that is out to murder you at all costs, blame you for all the problems, etc., because you are the source of all their problems. You're also the source of all the victories over here. And when we have this very simplistic idea that this is just me, then we don't break it down. Whereas the way I talk with my own sweetheart, we just made love, and it started out with her 16-year-old, moved into her 8-year-old, and then her 18-year-old. And she's 24. So these are the inner ages. Now, for it to be a great marriage, coming together, a great bonding, I need to navigate and partner with her to show up for a 16-year-old, to show up for an 8-year-old, to show up for an 18-year-old, each of which have very different needs. Now, the 8-year-old maybe wants just to be special, and the 16-year-old wants to be sexy and curious, or it's very hard to say without attuning. But the question, as we move within our inner ages, is always, who's there now? Is he or she happy? What does he or she need? And what you'll notice if someone is candid, as my beautiful partner is amazingly honest and candid, is she will say, I don't want to tell you. So how old is the one who doesn't want to tell me? Well, she's 5 years old. It's like, so your 5-year-old doesn't want to tell me what she's in? No. And why not? What's afraid? Well, this will happen. It's like, okay. And why does she think that will happen? Okay. So that sounds very intelligent, 5-year-old. You don't want this to happen. You're afraid if you say this true thing, this will happen. So you're hiding, right? Okay, yes, you're hiding. Wonderful. So what will we do? And we play a little game. And if we change the reality, so then some part, of course, of her wants to be seen, but the 5-year-old is scared and be seen. So we have to have a negotiation. We have to go back and forth to see who's doing what within the psyche, for what reason. And we have to see that it's all beautiful, that there is a very good reason that so-and-so wants to start drinking now. There's a very good reason that so-and-so wants to have a tantrum right now. There's a very good reason why this and that and the other. And then there's a very good reason why other parts of the self that are at odds. No, the last thing we need is a tantrum. No. There's an entire landscape of tensions within the self. And then what we typically have in this culture is we have a huge, big squash of a persona on top of all of it that says, this is weird, this is schizophrenic, I don't want to be weird, I don't want anyone to see what's going on. Absolutely nothing. I'm fine too. And why are you looking at me? Don't get away from me. I'm fine. Because that's one of the things that we do in our culture, is we attack people for bringing uncomfortable distinctions into focus. Because in this culture, there are lots of taboos. There are lots of secrets. We're a Christian culture. Jesus said, honor the poor, blah, 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 blah. And we have all these Christians trying to get rich and not giving, the poor and this and that and the other. And then we there's so many big pink elephants in the room. And these parts inside, they know it. But to do well within the culture, you're not supposed to talk about these things. They're not talked about. So don't. And so you have to see why. Well, because if I tell you this, you'll think I'm an idiot. Why is that? Well, that's what my brother told me when I told him about this. Or I watched this shy person in school. They said something like this and then everyone bullied them. I don't want to be like that. Oh, I see. You don't want to be bullied like they all bullied that person who said that. I see. Well, that's very smart. Good for you. You protected yourself from not being bullied by them. Amazing. Great. Good on you. How wonderful. But here's the secret. I'm not going to bully you. And you have important things to say. And some part of you will always feel lonely if you don't say them. What do you think about that? Well, I want to turn away. I don't want to think about it. Okay, would you like me to cuddle you? Would you like me to hold you while you're turning away and hiding? Would you like to hide? Who are you hiding from? The bullies? Who? This is liquidity. This is truth. This is energy like waterfalls flowing through reality. And the psyche is exactly like that. It's very much like the entire globe, where at any moment in time there's a riot in Brazil, there's corruption in Venezuela, there's corruption in London, there's some horrible rape going on in New York City as we speak. And there's these horror points, and then there's these flare-ups of violence, and there's flare-ups of, suppression, and there's all these tensions. The exact same tensions that are going on inside the self are happening within the species in a macrocosm-microcosm dynamic, where, how do we get these presidents? Because we voted for them. And just like within the presidential system of a democracy, the majority decides, oh my gosh, we need someone who's really big and scary because I don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to handle it. And then this big bluster comes forth. I know how to handle it. Leave it to me. And so the other scared parts of the psyche say, okay, we'll give you, go on, do it, handle it. But of course, the big blustery part doesn't necessarily know how to handle it any more than anyone else. And so when a lot of people think that their big blustery part is more important and able and competent and respected and blah, 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 than the rest of themselves, they will lead with bluster and blah, blah, blah. And when that works for them in this and that business environment, and then the country itself is going through some crisis, etc., then let's vote for bluster and this and that and the other because it worked for me. Well, the microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm. There are parts of the self that know exactly how we are ruining our own lives, and they want to speak up. And then there's other parts that say, we don't want to hear about you. You're the one that got us bullied. You're the weird one. Shut up. And this one can make us look a bit more normal. And that's all that we're settling for. We'll settle for looking normal. And so go away, you that are a little bit unusual. And then the unusual parts that know things much more than the usual parts sit in the wings and wait to be invited. There's the story of Sleeping Beauty, and it's commonly thought that, and told in a way, that there is a witch, the witch that is not invited to the christening, and that she is an evil witch, and that's why she's not invited, but she shows up anyways and curses, and then the Sleeping Beauty, the princess, goes to sleep for 100 years. But another way of looking at that story is that whatever we call evil within the culture is suppressed and not invited to the table. Gangs are evil. Okay, we'll try and persecute and punish them. That doesn't seem to work. You will not get rid of gangs, and they don't, in fact, until they invite the gang leaders to the table as honored guests, and then talk about how to navigate within the framework of policing and how to deal with the gang's problems and the police's problems and the community problems, how to negotiate a ceasefire for this, that, and the other, and you cannot do that without honoring the gang leaders, because they have the power, and they will always have the power, unless we want to have the vast majority of people operating in a police state, and much more importantly, unless we want to change the culture to a culture in which gangs are not needed. So for insecure teenagers to have a sense of belonging and identity, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, number 3, most teenagers do not feel they belong anywhere, certainly not at home. And so in that interpretation of Sleeping Beauty is cursed by the energy not invited to the birth, to the christening. So within the family ancestry, within the landscape of the psyche, all the relatives are invited to bless the new baby. But this one relative is forgotten, feared, and taboo. So it is not invited. And it is the uninvited guest which curses the feast and leads to unconsciousness, leads to trauma, and keep until the kiss of the lover, in this sense, awakens and breaks the curse. And so in that sense, going back to here, it would be as if one of these ages is taboo. And many of us have a certain event in our lives that is unspeakable, where this part of me that did this in response to this, I can't even look at that. I can't face that this was done to me. I cannot face that I did this. It doesn't matter whether it was the receiving or doing. There is an unspeakable part that no one will love, that no one wants to see, that is banished. And this part refuses the marriage invitations of all the other members of the self, or is not invited. And it stands like a cancerous pit, radiating a contrarian energy that is often experienced as self-sabotage. And it will not be healed until it is reintegrated into the psyche. And until the disease that was given to it by a sick environment is given back into the unhealthy environment that induced that state. Nature does not produce sick seeds. The seeds become sickly when they are malnourished, traumatized, etc. So here we have me right now. Here we have me and everything that I know of my life. And then here we have all of humanity, which is a bigger me. It's always a circle inside a circle, inside a circle, inside a circle. So here we have the species. And just like within all of me are the full range of dormant emotions and this and that, within humanity, there is, right at this moment, there are thousands of people falling in love. Right at this moment, there are thousands of people being murdered. Right at this moment, there are thousands of people committing suicide. Right at this moment, there are 2, 5, and 8-year-old little girls being molested and raped by their fathers. Right now, there are young children being sold into prostitution. Right now, there are lies being told to help people in power keep that power. The entire dance of the human experience is happening right now at some point on the globe. But we, within our chosen point of in the place of humanity, we, in this little of the little dot, we are right here. Maybe next year we'll take a plane and we'll fly over here. Now this is really what this talk is all about. This point is moving around within the psyche of the self, which is always expanding as we have each new experience. This point is moving around where, last year Rwanda was genocide, and now there will be a new genocide over here. Rwandans are beginning to heal. So within any space-time location, there is a rhythm. Dewey wrote a beautiful book called The Study of Cycles. And what he found out is that there is a rhythm for every single thing. There is a rhythm for pork bellies that looks like this. There's a rhythm for feed cattle that looks like this. There's a rhythm for earthquakes that looks like this. There is a rhythm for every single thing. I was in Singapore recently, and one of their great engineering feats is this giant skyscraper where they have 3 skyscrapers, and way up on the 58th floor, they have a huge, in effect, boat with one of the world's largest vanishing pools up on the top of the building. And one of the things that large structure engineers and architects know is that every building has a sound. It has a vibration. It's usually a slower sound than the human ear can hear. Not always. It has a vibration. And it has its own rhythm. Now, when you combine 3 buildings together, you've not only got to, you've got to anticipate how they're going to move. And then in this case, they have this 200-foot cantilever out in the front, and they have a dance floor. And they literally did engineering to find that the jitterbug and music of that ilk dulled down the rhythm of the building and thus helped the building be more stable. But another song amplified like a swing. That if 200 people, or, so it's a quantity of how many, if 200 people are all swinging to this particular rhythm, and that's the exact same rhythm that's exaggerating the building, those 200 people dancing their heart outs can destroy $1 billion piece of architecture and cause system-wide collapse. Now, this is exactly what goes on within human beings. I was in a relationship recently where the therapeutic body was aligning with my deepest childhood traumas and rupturing the thing into a place of complete collapse and, traumatic meltdown. And this is what happens. This is why expertise is needed in mental, emotional, and physical arenas with equal discipline, with equal science. These are not just, issues with pork bellies. These are issues that deal with every single part of who we are. We have a rhythm. We have the time of the month. We have the rhythm of the tides. We have the birthing 9-month rhythm. We have so many different rhythms. We have a rhythm of building up energy and a rhythm of down. We have a rhythm of out expression and a rhythm of sleep. And if you put energy at your weakest point in such a way that you will be rewarded for taking a little step towards disintegration, and then rewarded again for taking another step of disintegration. And on the other hand, as you unravel yourself, as you are unraveled by an unhealthy environment around you, you are faced with, why I said it's important to understand Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, is it can also be expressed as Maslow and the hierarchy of motivation. So that physical safety is the first motivation, and it remains primary until it is met. Security is the next motivation, and it will remain primary until it is met. Belonging and the need to love and be loved is the next motivation, and it will remain primary until it is met. And this is why if you have someone who is in very deep need of love, who has not met that need of love, this is why you have those stories, I remember in Sherlock Holmes, the innocent woman stealing the barrel of, her honorable father and all that, because her lover, who met that need to feel special and belong, insisted that she had to do it in order to be worthy of him, etc. And so this is, you have to be careful the people you hang around. Because why? Because if you come into a social group with a dominant need to belong, that group has control over steering you into who you will become. Because who you will become is what is necessary to belong and do well in that group. Hang out with a bunch of drug dealers to belong, you will become a top drug dealer. Hang out with a bunch of thieves to belong, you will become the top thief. Hang out with a bunch of psychologists, and to belong, you will become self-aware. And it's very critical to understand that each of us goes through this hierarchy of motivation and is less accountable for who we become than our group environment until that need for belonging is met. Because we must play a sanctioned role. And interestingly, the scapegoat, we in family constellation therapy, it's almost mythological that there's a scapegoat and black sheep, there's a goody two-shoes, there's a this, there's a that. In my family, the role was a little bit confusing for me. I was supposed to be the bully, then I stopped being the bully about age 10 because I didn't like the role. Then I tried to be an advocate, but that wasn't really, welcome in the family to advocate for my younger siblings' well-being. So then I became the critic, and then I was made out to be arrogant for being the critic, so I just withdrew altogether. And then I was framed, by my parents as being the one who didn't care about anyone, and that's why I'd withdrawn. But really, there was no welcome role in which I could contribute healthy love to that family system. Now, my sister became the passionate critic and the one that did everything right and perfectly. And my brother became the illegal delinquent. Then the next brother became, completely passive and the one that everyone would go to be listened to because he could see everyone's perspective but had no emotion. And then we had the pleaser who, turned his pleasing into fundamentalist Christianity and stuff of, pleasing the perfect God, doing it all perfectly, making everyone happy, and feeling incredible stress and tension because, what makes this person happy doesn't make this person. And, so the pleaser has a very difficult time. And so these are roles that if we played these roles well, we would each belong in the family and have a place. And then my other brother was a tantrumer before he became more adult. He was the tantrumer that everyone bribed not to have a tantrum, and so and Dad was the smart sociopath, and Mom was the sociopathic or the narcissistic beauty within the culture. The little model queen, all obsessed with everything. Now she owns a makeup company. Dad the sophisticate, and couldn't make any mistakes and never had any emotions. So he would say, So this is the hierarchy of needs and how they fit into roles. And you see, the reality is that if you're going to be born to someone, to our family, you're going to end up in one of those roles. And if there's a new child, then does that be the one who gets picked on, or they will form a role. To belong, you must adopt that role. When the need to be loved and belong is primary, you have no choice but to take the role offered to you. And usually, the most innocent and kind, open, and sensitive person gets the shittiest role, because everyone else is more sociopathic and they care. They pick up that nobody wants this role, nobody wants this role, nobody wants this role, which is why it's always the kind, innocent, caring daughter, usually, that takes care of the sick and sane mother. Why? No one else wants the role. Everyone else is invited to play the role. Would you like to take care of Mom? No, that old bag. Why would I want to take care of her? Okay, so sociopathic brother number one, doesn't want it. Then this brother, would you like to take care of Mom? Oh, I'd love to take care of Mom. Of course, he's the, pleaser. I'd like nothing better than to take care of Mom. The trouble is I have this and this and this, and I'm pleasing all these other people. I don't know if I can manage it, And then you have the next role. Would you like to take care of Mom? And what do you mean I'm the black sheep? How can I be the black sheep and do something good? Get out of here, you lousy hussy, And then, would you like to take care of Mom? I'm better than you. Why should I take care of Mom? You've got nothing to do. Da, 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 da. And so it's the person who is most sensitive to other people's feelings who often ends up with the crappiest role. Which then means that because nobody then in the other roles who has rejected it, they all want to feel noble about their crappy attitude, right? So they each feel guilty in different ways. And so they're going to downplay the importance of the role. So the innocent one gets the crappiest role. That's step number one. Step number two is everyone feels guilty, and so they all ignore and don't return the phone calls of and abandon, etc., the person who took the role, because she makes them feel, it's often a her, she or he makes them, the rest of the people, feel like crappy people. And they don't want to feel like crappy people. They want to behave crappily, and they want to leave her alone with the job, but they don't want to feel crappy. So then some play, this one says, just pretend she no longer exists, so now she's abandoned in that relationship. Then the next one says, you're an idiot, you shouldn't be doing that, and punishes her. In other words, saying, you should be like me, everyone ought to abandon Mom, she's such a useless da-da-da-da-da, everyone ought to abandon Mom, and you're bad for encouraging Mom to be so dysfunctional by taking care of her. And so then she gets blamed by person number two. And then person number three just says, I don't have time for that, and makes herself superior. And everyone dissociates from the one who's taking care of mom. And then as that person in the crappiest role available gets depressed, feels lonely, feels hostile, feels bitter, in response to being abandoned, played in superiority games, told to, and gets no honoring for this because everyone's protecting their guilt, then she becomes hurt. So that's step 3. Now, step 4 is everyone blames her. Again, I'll just leave it with the her. Everyone blames her for her symptoms rather than taking any responsibility. That first, leaving her to the role. Secondly, refusing to help. Thirdly, abandoning her. And fourthly, punishing her in various ways has made doing the worst part a completely martyred position. And so they blame her. And then, because she's often a sweet and empathic thing, she becomes torn between wanting to be kind to them as they're punishing her and wanting to attack them for being so fucking self-centered and unkind. And then she doesn't know how to deal with this, and then she thinks she's going crazy, and they all tell her, yes, you are crazy. You're an idiot and all that, and they further dissociate. This is the process of insanity. And what it takes to stop that is a lot of character, is saying things like my girlfriend told me tonight that despite the fact that chess is completely meaningless on some level, obviously I've gotten enough social conditioning around my intelligence as an American man that to lose at chess takes something away from my social status, which, since I'm dealing with topics of trauma and shame and dissociation and abandonment, I'm hanging on to that little status. So, I notice my calves are getting tight as I'm preparing to lose, and I comment to my sweetheart, who knows how to read me, of course, and she gets that it's important for me to win. So she lets me win. But she didn't tell me. Then she's sulking a bit because she's just performed an incredibly generous act, but I have no idea that she's done it. But she has the good sense to tell me about it. And I turn her into a hero. That's how you kind of break this cycle. I say, you are absolutely right. It is important for me to win. And you're much smarter than I am because, 1, you haven't bought into all this male chauvinistic crap about winning and all that. So you're smarter than me there. 2, you're smart enough to beat me in chess. 3, you are kind enough to put our relationship and my health above winning. That's incredibly mature and smart. And 4, you've given me this feeling of winning, which I know for some people, they can't face the truth that, women are doing all kinds of stuff behind the back to help these men who need these little props, to feel masculine enough to cope with the day, let alone do this and that in the world. And the whole male chauvinistic bias is propping them up as well. The women are propping them up. The male chauvinistic bias is propping up. But these men can barely cope compared to the women. And so many of us are so weak that we can't bear to honor our spouses for the incredible bounty that they give us, because that is what? Demeaning because we need a woman? This is how deep male chauvinism gets. It's like if women are inferior and we need them, then it means we're inferior. It's a joke. The whole male chauvinistic stuff, go back to one of the earlier talks, is an absolute joke at our expense. it's important to understand the hierarchy of needs to navigate effectively in this. It's important to understand the journey of time is a journey of geography relative to focus of consciousness. It's important to understand marriage, that marriage is the sustainable partnering of every part within ourself with every other part within ourself, which enables us to have the possibility of sustainably entering a marriage with every other part of our partner. I'm scared of my partner's she is a teenage age that I'm scared of, and so I'm not a very good partner with that age. And that age is, not a very great partner to me, because as a man, I take that part close to a wound. A man really hurt my sweetheart at that age. And so that age is a lot less trusting of men than the other ages, with good reason. And so, the marriage is a little weak at that point. I'm afraid of being attacked by that part. That part is afraid of violated by me. And then blamed for it, which is what happens before. That's why I kind of give the example is very, very often the kindest and sweetest people are abused because the virus of abuse is present in the culture. The question is, who is going to be infected by the disease? And it's usually the most accommodating people. They've even done studies in hospitals to show that aggravating, angry, and rebellious patients in hospital get better much quicker and die less frequently in hospital than the pleaser who's willing to go, oh, don't trouble yourself for me. I'm sure you've got much more important things to do, don't you? Oh, I'll do exactly what you say, Dr. Phil. I'm sure you're so knowledgeable. These are the people that get treated like absolute crap and are absolute favorites of all the medical participants because they can treat them like crap. They have to go do the extra mile for the people whining and complaining resentfully, otherwise they'll get sued. And the people going along with all this love and all that are enabling the abuse within the system to be pointed towards them. The abuse of not caring enough about patients to actually have enough staff on hand, not caring enough about patients to prevent the diseases, not caring enough about patients to educate them emotionally and mentally, which is so often the cause, particularly in areas of addiction, which when it comes to sugar and eating and overworking, there's most of your health problems right there. This is repressed trauma. It has nothing to do inherently with the body. It becomes a body issue when the mental emotional issues are not treated, and it is abandonment to raise an entire generation without a single hour in high school of emotional literacy. Well, this is just stupidity. It's abandonment before they walk in the hospital. And then because they've abandoned them then, they've created a much more expensive problem now, and then they tear their hair out. We don't have enough money. Well, then prevent the problem before it costs $300,000. I've spent $150,000 on therapy. It would have cost my government exactly $10 to send my parents the Adverse Childhood Experience study, rank them so both highly, and get an advisory that we do not recommend you have children. Well, that for $10 eliminates $150,000 in therapy and counting. So if you cannot afford to fix the problem, you definitely cannot afford to allow the problem to go to the next generation. It's that simple. I was talking with a woman just the other day, my neighbor, who couldn't afford pregnancy pills, the good ones. And I said, well, then you certainly can't afford a baby. I mean, if you can't afford the medicine to prevent a baby, it's about 1/1,000,000th of the cost of having a baby. So, these kind of stupid cause and effect dynamics go on right and left, where a few dollars of tax money would save millions of dollars of tax money down the road, such as of apologizing to black people and giving them honor on a national level and this and that and the other, and doing active rituals along like that, a few dollars a person, is a lot cheaper than $80,000 a year in prison. But no, we couldn't possibly do that. That's just terrorize and traumatize an entire race, pretend it isn't happening, just like we do with our children, and then pretend we don't have any money to fix with it, and lament, about the problem of these young people. So understand the journey. I want to talk about what love is in this context. Love is the establishing of sustainable respect to see and to look again. Repeat. Spect, to see. To look and look again at that which we are trying to respect. It is, of course, completely unreasonable to think that we can respect more than what is within our view. So to love is to care for, to water, to nurture the best, the beauty. In Plato's word, the beauty, truth, and goodness as the triangle of sacred values. To love and to build the beauty, trust, and goodness in what is within our sphere of domain. To support and challenge people to take the truth, to tell the truth, to support and grow the healthy plants that bring life to the face of the planet, to tend our bodies, to bring beauty, truth, and goodness to our bodies, to our hearts, to our minds, to see the beauty, truth, and goodness that wants to grow within our environment. And to attune, to restore as much, to treat violence, shame, trauma, rage, rape, betrayal, etc., as mental, emotional diseases. To restore balance, starting within the self, the yin-yang. I've done a whole blog around the way this is way out of whack within our world, the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, in every dynamic. And if we can start to realize that every sense of identity is just a lens setting, number one, it's a lens setting. That who we are is indistinguishable ultimately from the environment to the right and left, to the south and north of who we are. That who we are is coming out of the water, the air, the breath, etc., and will return back to the environment. That it is a very lineal, compartmentalized notion that this is me and that's not me. That while that may be a useful setting in the focus, in the lens of consciousness, it's actually not as real as to understand that we are a part of it all. And all of us, all that is a part of us. And that over time, as the lens dissolves in death, as the lens expands with growth and awareness, as we travel the spaces, what is them and what is me will blur. That in the most majestic and wonderful experiences, we change. We thought this was the way it was, now we think this is the way it is, and it's changing. It's beautiful. What then is love? I want to suggest that love is many things. Most of them are selfish. Lust, I want to fuck you. Selfish. love. I like you. I want to be near you. Selfish. Not what do you want? It's I need you. I want to see you. I need this. And attachment. I'm attached. My identity, I need you. I get something to you. You help me feel safe. I'm attached to you. When I have sex with you, I love you. I'm attached to you. And these three selfish loves lead to manipulation, lies, pushiness. Come on, I really want to have sex with you, It's all self-centered. There's one kind of love, and there's one love only that is about the other person and what makes them feel loved. And it is the disciplined, conscious choice to stand in love, not fall in it, by being loving. That is to say, what would help you feel most supported at this time? I just want you out of my life. I don't even want to think about that. I'm completely overwhelmed. Thank you. I'm going to leave now, and you contact me if you'd like me in your life, and all the best. Being loving. What would make you feel completely loved and supported? I really need someone to hold me, to be there for me, to listen to all my feelings, and not let me go until I'm ready. Got it. Okay, how would you like me to hold you? How's this? Is there anything else I can do to make you feel safer, make you feel cared about? And you just please speak up if there's anything I can do, and I'm here for you as long as you need. Many of us have never had a single person do that. A therapist can simulate it for 50 minutes in a paid contract, and up, session's over. What about attuning to the individual as long as they need? This is being loving, and it is a willed choice, because you can make the choice to be loving without feeling sex, without having any attachment, without feeling in love or love for the person. You can decide, this is someone who does need this, and the world will be more beautiful, more true, more good if I give this gift and serve what is happening in this person and honor who they are. This is the choice to be loving. Any one of us can make this choice to be loving. And you know it's true when the person tells you to get lost, or the person tells you to hold on to them and never let go, you're just as happy with the answer. Because that's what would help them feel safe, feel respected, and feel loved. It's not about you looking good. Obviously, you look like a hero if you're asked to hold them forever, and I rescued this person and all that. I chose to be loving. How do you do that? Well, I asked them what they need. They told me to get lost. I got lost and they felt better. That's just as loving. It just doesn't look like a great heroic thing. This is the choice to be love. And in that context, as we interact with all the many selves that are ultimately a wider setting of the human species lens, we bring safety, well-being, trust, etc. to those people, or we do not. Or we do not. And in that context of doing and not doing, we leave the terrain. If we can imagine this dot as a roving dot interacting with all the other parts of ourselves, inside ourselves and outside, and that through mirror neurons, they're actually the same. We are learning how to create sustainable well-being. We are learning how to create sustainable abundance. We are learning how to create sustainable success, sustainable beauty, truth, and goodness. And we're learning how, we're learning about it, and as we do, we are leaving the ground more beautiful. We're leaving the ground more beautiful, or we are leaving the ground more ugly behind us. We are leaving our campground. And we can move through the larger ecosphere, taking this little dot right here and taking pristine jungle and turning it into a nuclear waste dump. Then we go over to this pristine bit of beauty and we can turn it into a landfill. And then we can turn this bit into a dumping ground of hurt feelings and rage and all that of all the people we betray. And then we can come over here because it starts to get hot. Everyone's hating us for all the hurt we're causing. We go over here where we're not known, and then we create a bunch of mayhem over here, and then we can go here. And then when we get bored of that, we can fly over here, and we can start making this a mess over here and this mess over here. And we can go through life taking pockets of reality, pockets of who we are in the larger sense, and leaving them worse off for the people that follow. Or we can navigate within the inner self and the outer self with a clear commitment and promise that every place that we touch to the best of our ability, we will leave it more beautiful, more true, more good, more aware of its own beauty, truth, and goodness than when we found it. And this is also a journey through life. If we understand that the ego is a narrow lens, and that this moment in time is an incredibly narrow lens within the lens of self, if we understand that were it not for the blinders created by this is me and this is not me, we are in fact intricately connected emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, physically. We're interconnected sexually. There wasn't a single one of us born without the act of sex and or lovemaking. And so to be loving to ourselves in the largest sense is to navigate this world step by step, country by country, person in our life by person in our life, making a commitment to fight within the relationship for what is beautiful, for what is true, for what is good within this land, within this community, within this reality, for what is good. And that the goal of the fight, the goal of the flow, the goal of the joy is to leave more beauty, truth, and goodness behind us than when we arrived. And if I've done that in this time with you in week 34, I hope you will honor me by joining me in some of the other weeks. And honor me by allowing whatever is beautiful, true, and good in me that you can see, to allow you to change your life, your relationship with yourself, in a way in which others around you can see more of your beauty, truth, and goodness. Thank you.